Thank you very much, Chair. It's actually an honor and a huge responsibility to talk after Professor Stiglitz. And I was just thinking of President Obama's speech a couple of weeks ago at the convention, where he said that he was the only one stupid enough to talk after Michelle Obama. So I'm a bit having that feeling now. But in any case, as you said, it's my first time here, and I've been told I have to be bold, otherwise I won't get any more invitations. So I'll try. I think it's the main goal that we're all pursuing, so we're all striving for this strategic edge on or leadership on key technologies, be it green, digital technologies, all the value chain. That's the huge effort we're all in at this point, and competing actually, not only as a source of growth and productivity going forward, but also as a main pillar of economic security. Engaging, of course, in diversification and in the build-up of key industries at home. So these reindustrialization policies that have made a huge comeback. But at the EU level, I think we need to be aware that there are a few specificities that make this race maybe a bit harder, but that we need to turn them into opportunities, so that in the end, this strategic leadership done from the EU perspective can have our own EU trademark, and I think this is important. And let me just go quickly through these 5 dimensions, and then I'll try to be a bit more specific on potential ways forward to turn them into opportunities. So the first one, and this is related to what Professor Stiglitz was saying, is the defense of the multilateral order and of a rules-based system. I think this has been a trademark also in our own interests due to our open nature for the past decades. The second one would be, of course, our enhanced concern, given our incomplete fiscal union, towards fiscal sustainability, and therefore the limits that this imposes on our fiscal space. The third one would be the need to protect one of the cornerstones of our own soul, which is our welfare state. The fourth would be the need to revamp, of course, our defense industry, which has been lagging with respect to other areas, and at the same time, of course, ensuring Ukraine's defense. And the fifth, which has been mentioned both by Mario and by Professor Stiglitz, would be, of course, we need to take care of the governance difficulties that we have at home. We need to understand that we might be in agreement with all the recommendations that come from all these very thoughtful reports, be it the Letta report, the Draghi report that will be out on Monday, but we need to avoid frustration when it comes to actually delivering on those recommendations. And we need to do it trying to minimize the capital cost, the political cost that is needed to put them in place. So let me just go through those issues quickly and put also some proposals on the table. On EU's role in this battle for hearts and minds, which is, I think, a good way to put it, we are and we need to keep being a key player in, as I said before, in defending international trade, the international financial architecture, and the need for its reform. A few elements that I can list, but where we need to keep on pushing, of course, the revamping of the global financial safety net, pushing for innovative solutions as well to help vulnerable countries deal with a huge intake of debt. Actually, we have now 60% of low-income countries that are at high risk or already in debt distress. Is their trade-off between fighting climate change and financing development, increase the multilateral development bank's firepower, particularly through the use of the special drawing rights. And here I have to say that Spain, as acknowledged by the IMF and the World Bank, has been championing these efforts. We will be rechanneling 50% of our SDRs with specific agreements also between the World Bank and the IMF to be able, as I said, to ease this trade-off between climate fight and development needs for low-income countries. Then reinforce international taxation cooperation, like the initiative made by the Brazilian government within the G20. And also, finally, at this point, we need, as Europe, to remain very vigilant and proactive, or even leading efforts in the face of violation of international and humanitarian rights. And of course here I'm referring not only to the economic case in defending, for example, the disruption or against disruption in global value chains, or restoring also food prices, but I'm referring to the humanitarian case. And we have, of course, to keep on showing this clear commitment of the EU towards upholding international and humanitarian law, be it by keep on defending Ukraine, and also calling for peace and respect of humanitarian rights in Gaza. Just on this, let me finish this small bit by saying that next July in Sevilla, we will be organizing, hosting the 4th UN conference on financing for development, which I hope can be a good scenario for putting on the table bold actions in these areas, and where we can lead and also coordinate with the developing world to be able to push for these much needed reforms. Also, we will be coordinating with Brazil and the COP that will be held, as you know, in Belém. A couple of quick words on trade policy. Of course, what is the EU spot on this? Open strategic autonomy, economic security agenda. As I said before, we need to keep the rules-based approach. We need to understand that trade wars, subsidy races are not the solution for the EU. That's not how we need to understand economic security, but, and that's a huge but, which is we need not to be naive at this point. I think trade and industrial and competition policies are all intertwined at this point when it comes to really ensuring not only the level playing field between our firms and those competing in these strategic sectors, but also that EU's economic security can be enforced going forward. And on these specific elements, like ensuring, of course, continued access to critical raw materials, incentives for diversifying exports, also the promotion of foreign direct investment in those sectors where we have lost technological edge. I think this is key as well. And of course, deepen the free trade agreements with key partners. And on this, I would just leave one word, and we can have more discussion on that, which is, of course, Mercosur. Third element, which is idiosyncratic to Europe, and Professor Stiglitz mentioned it as well, we have a huge financing gap going forward if we want to make good on all the investment needs that will be there. So there are many estimations of how much investment we will need in order to actually go for our main strategic objectives. And even without defense investment, the best estimates are around 5 percentage points of GDP on annual terms. Just to remind you that the EU budget is around 1.1% of our GDP, so that just gives you an idea of the envelope, of the size of the investment needs that we will have. So we need to rally that financing, of course, boosting the private sector. We need to leverage on the private sector, on our capital markets. This is a whole capital markets union agenda, but with huge uncertainties on how fast we can push, how quickly those gains will be coming to financing our industrial needs, and to what extent they can cover, how much they can cover of all these financing gap. Then if we go to second financing source, which is national domestic fiscal space, here there is not only this limitation of EU state aid rules, which is ensuring of course, level playing field amongst the different countries. There is also the national fiscal space. We have fiscal rules coming back to place in 2025, and I think this is important also at the domestic level. Just to give you a message with the Spanish hat as well, in Spain we are thriving for this positive feedback loop, which is growing. And at the same time that we grow, we implement fiscally responsible policies so that we can make it compatible to have a reduction in our deficit to GDP ratios. We aim at going to 3% of GDP of deficit, 3% of GDP deficit this year, already primary surplus next year with a 2.5% of GDP deficit goal, more than 20 percentage points of reduction in debt to GDP levels, at the same time than being the fastest growing big economy in the EU. So this element of growing out of debt at the same time as being fiscally responsible, I think is an element that can be also a way forward that could protect investments and therefore be aligned with our strategic agenda. But then, even though, so as I said, we have the private, which is limited, or at least cannot cover for the full gap. We have the national public space, which is limited. And then we have a truly EU public good nature of many of these investments, including defense, including energy, including, of course, many of these digital projects. And on this, or if you add up these three elements, I think there is a clear case to consider an increase in EU resources to finance those EU public goods. Of course, there is a discussion on our own resources, as was mentioned already, but I think given also that 2026 is the end date of Next Generation EU, it's a good time to reconsider the creation of a permanent debt issuing program to fund these EU public goods. Then the defense of our European social model. I think we need to fight this vibe session that we have nowadays, where there is a growing detach in people's perception and emotions from the macro performance, from the big macro figures. And to some extent, this is actually leading or getting towards political polarization and fueled by increased inequality. And this is also having not only economic costs, but this is having costs for democracy. You will call it demagogy, no? So it's a combination that is turning to be very detrimental for our societies. And here there are many proposals, but I think the main element is what I said before, is that we need to keep our take on the importance of the welfare state in Europe, potentially renewing our social contract. There are many contributions, one from Minouche Safik, where she talks about how to renew the social contract via two main elements. So first one would be to give security, and the second one would be to give opportunities. And these opportunities include, of course, investments in education, investments in reskilling, which also have long-term economic returns. And then my last point on governance, and I'll be quick. So we have, as I said before, huge ambition, many proposals that are actually needed, but we need to reconcile those with agility into this further integration process. So how to do this, aside from thinking of big changes, big political shifts, I think we need to be practical also in the short term and think a bit out of the box. And on this, we can take examples from other areas, and I like the concept of a sandbox. We have discussed this many times, but think of prospective test cases that can actually capitalize on willing member states that are able to pioneer innovative solutions for further integration. I think this is a potential way forward. So how could this work? You have a small group of member states that is expressing interests in those initiatives, in those prospective test cases, or PTCs, because we love acronyms in the Brussels bubble. But then they can define those and then circumscribe what could be the operating and legal conditions under this could work, and then put them to work for a few years, for a specific amount of time. The Commission will be involved. The Commission would assess the impact of those initiatives, and then they can actually recommend enlarging those initiatives to more member states. So that we're not stopped until everything is decided, or we try to avoid those potential vetoes. And just to finish, therefore, I think we need to we need to strive for this strategic edge, but without actually forgetting about our core values, which are also a precondition for sustainable growth going forward. Here, Giuseppe Borrelli is here. I remember one of his speeches where he said that the EU cannot be a herbivore in a world of carnivores. There was also Sigmar Gabriel saying that in a world of carnivores, vegetarians have a very rough time. But I would say that we need to stop being only herbivores, but let's not forget about what we are originally, and let's maybe turn into omnivores so that we can actually adapt more easily and win in this battle for evolution. Thank you very much.